Doesn't seem. There we go. Okay. All right. Forgive my voice in the recording. I'm getting sicker, so we'll try to get through this quickly. First of all, I made an articles controller so I could keep up with you guys. So I scaffolded an article, and that took me about 30 seconds. So your assignment should not take longer than an hour at least. And I'm going to remove, I had an authentication here in my recipes controller, which was the basic authentication. I'm going to remove that so that I can use this authenticate, this Devise gem instead. So the Devise gem is found if you just search on the web for Rails Devise gem. The first one that comes up is here. It's Plataformatech is the username on GitHub, and this has been around for a while, and it works really well. It's very flexible, and it does a lot of stuff very easily for you. So it can do things like a lost password email. You could put up a lost password link, and the user could click on it, and it'll send you a new link so they can go in and reset their password. It doesn't store the passwords in the database as clear text. It stores them as a salted, encrypted string. So there's no way to get the password out of that file. If you were to break in and grab their database, there's no way to unencrypt that information. So also there's no way to send the user their original password. That's why a lot of these sites now, they send you a link to reset your password because they don't know what your real password is. So when an authentication comes through, you type in your password and it comes through as normal text to the Rails application or any application, any web application, and they encrypt that using a same type of a key, and then that encrypted string they match against the string that's in the database. So there's no way that the database has the actual password that you typed in originally. It also has a authenticatable system, which means that if somebody logs in or signs up for your site with a specific email address, they block it as being not valid yet until the user responds to an email that this gem sends out. So when you sign up, this sends out an email to the address that you signed up with a URL that you have to click on, and that validates that you have a true live person at the end of that email address. Because you've seen in quarters past how hard it is or how easy it is to fake out a regular expression email, right? It's easy to put in a fake email address just to get access to a system. But if they force you to respond to an email, then your email has to be valid. So that's a really good thing. You want valid emails in your database. Recoverable, that's what I said, it lets you reset. Rememberable means that it will remember you across sessions by putting a cookie, a session type cookie in the browser so that when you come back the next day that they remember you don't have to log in again. And all of these things are built for you automatically, and you can just add or subtract those issues. So it goes through, if you read this entire thing, usually these gems have a way to get started. And so the link that I gave you to the Railscast by Ryan Bates, the older one, used an earlier version of this Devise gem. So it said to put in a specific RC something, release candidate. It's an earlier version of this gem. Yeah, and so if you do that, it won't work for you. So we just want to start following these directions, and we're going to put gem Devise in our gem file. So I'm just going to copy that, open up our gem file, just like we added all these other fakers and things. And now once we add a gem to our gem file, what do we have to do to force that into our system? Bundle install. Okay, so we're going to run the bundler install, and that will actually put the gem into our system. It'll download the gem, put it in our system. The next thing we have to do while that's running is to generate run a generator on this new Devise gem with a parameter of install. Sorry, here we go. So this added the Devise gem and a lot of other things that were dependent on it. It installed Warden and some other things that this system is going to use. This bcrypt, Ruby. These are all gems dependent on the Devise gem, or the Devise gem is dependent on these gems. So we need to run that generate command. So inside of RubyMine, we can go to the run Rails generator, and let's see if it has anything in there. And it does. It has Devise install here. So if I start typing Devise, it comes up with all the Devise specific generators already for me. So what they typically, so I'm going to run the Devise install. I don't think I clicked it right. All right, Devise install with no arguments. And it's going to run some things down here, and we want to pay attention to the output here. Now, normally when they tell you this is a command line argument that you can run in a DOS window or a Linux window, a terminal window, whatever. So you have to kind of think about what is this running. It's running a generator. So in RubyMine, I need to run the generator. Okay, so that gives you an idea of what that is. So it gives me 4 things that you have to set up manually that they couldn't figure out how to do nicely. And one of them is you have to have a default URL, which is for this emailer system. So if you're not going to do any email authentication, like send this authentication or send a forget my password, things like that, then you don't have to do that. And I'm going to skip the email for now. We'll talk about email later. So we can safely skip step 1. Step 2 is to ensure we have a route. And we've talked about this before. You need to have something in your routes file, route to, and then some controller and some action. So let's make sure, I know mine is right, but let's go look at our routes file to show you where it is. And it's usually at the bottom here. I have a route to, and I'm going to my recipes index page. All right. So step 2 is done. Step 3, make sure you have flash messages in my application file. So they give an example of this. So do I have that? Yes. I should. We did that before. So it might be,
I think we moved it out of there.
We might have moved it, right? So, oh, I might have. No, here it is. There we go. See, look at that. Beautiful stuff. So I have my flash here in my main application layout. Yes?
Okay, in the gem, if you go back to the gem real quick, on the web, the gem instructions, he has in his example of adding that, oh no, I guess it's in the terminal, not there, it's in the terminal, in the steps that you have to do.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. So go back to that, to RubyMine. All right, so he has the example notice and alert.
Yeah. Yep.
So I added alert.
Okay.
Is that something that we should be doing? Because I'm figuring that it's going to be trying to throw something to the alert.
Yeah, it might. It might. So that might be a good idea. Let's do that. I can do that just by copying my existing stuff here and changing the hash value to my flash, and I could call this alert. So they might be using the hash alert in my flash. So let's do that. So that lets all 3 come out if necessary. Okay, good. Good catch. And then if we're going to deploy on Heroku, this is a specific thing that they want to set, so we can skip that. We're not doing that right now. All right, so we've successfully done all of that. Now let's go look. the next thing it wants to do is generate a model for our users. And we can call this model whatever we want. I suggest calling it users. But you can call it members, and they talk about further on down, if you do that, then all of the method names change to match that model name that you have. So if you call it authors, then all of your methods are going to be something like current author. Current, is like current user is going to be current author. User session is going to be author session. So all of these names of the methods that are generated are based on this model name that we have. So we're going to generate this model. Rails generate devise model, and the model is in caps. That means put in whatever you want for the name of your model. So we're going to go here and run our generator. Devise by itself, and the argument is going to be, I'm going to call it user. Say, okay. So it's going to go through and generate, much like we generated a model or a scaffold, it's going to generate the files necessary to deal with this model itself. And I should have a new migration in here when it finishes. So there it created this new migration. It created a models file and some tests, and it created a new route. So we're going to look at all of those right now. Let's look at the route first. In the route, it added at the top this devise for, which is a method with an argument of users, which is the name of the model that I created. And these resources were created by when I generated my scaffolding for my articles and my recipes. So devise for is a method created by the gem that we just installed. All right? And I'm going to run the rake routes while I look at some other stuff, since that takes some time. And let's go back and look at the other files while that's running. Not for the routes.
When you do the run rake routes, are you just running the routes or the seeds?
The routes.
Just the routes?
Rake routes. All that does is show me what Rails thinks all of my routes are. All of my URLs, URL mapping to internal controllers and actions. That's all it does. It doesn't do anything else but show me that information. So this is the migration that was created when I created my user, when I generated the Devise users. So it's going to create a table called users, and then these are the various fields that it needs. And you can uncomment these out. If you want it confirmable, that means that it's going to send you an email. Lockable, that means that if it's going to, after some number of attempts, it's going to lock your account. So if you try to log in 4 times and you missed your password 4 times, it locks the account and the administrator has to come unlock it. So I'm going to leave it as the default, and it's got all kinds of information like a date, time for when they signed in, their last sign in, their IP addresses. I can look at their IP addresses. They're stored in the table. No, I don't want to do any email. I don't want to do any email. So we have an email address, which is going to be the user's login name, and then their password and some other things that it needs. And then at the bottom, it adds an index. You guys are familiar with databases. Since we're going to be looking up the email a lot, it makes that an index. It indexes that column, okay, because that's going to be used a lot. And that also requires that the email is unique, meaning people can't come to your site email address and log in. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. How do I run this migration? DB migrate, right? So let's look at our routes while the migration is running. These are the new things that were added. These were all added for the Devise gem. All of these are new for the specific Devise gem. And since I called my model users, all of these are based on the user's name that I gave it. So we have a new user session. These are methods that I can use: edit, cancel, registrations. I can look at I can edit somebody's username and things like that. So it gives me all these different methods or routes that I can play with inside of my system. All right, so let's see if my migration worked. It did. It added the table, added the index, and so I'm done with that part. Let's go back to the Devise gem and see what else I need to do. So they give you all kinds of methods, like we did this with the basic authentication yesterday. So we're going to add that to some places. We can check to see if the user is signed in or not. And we already did our route. So let's look at, we'll do the views in a minute. All right, those are all testing, so we won't do any of that. At the top, they have a this wiki here that has all kinds of good information about how to do something. So I'm going to go to this wiki and look at some of these get started. So how do I add sign in, sign out, and sign up links to my layout template? Okay, that's something I need to do. I need to modify my existing login page so that when I click login, it goes to a login, right? There is nothing there right now, so I have that going to the wrong place. So let's go and look at that how-to here. And it gives you different ways of adding this information. And this is one way to do that. And I'm not going to add the edit or register right now. I'm just going to add this this signed in. So I'm going to copy this information. And where would I put this now if I wanted to modify this link? My partial navigation, right. So if I go look at my partial navigation, which is in my shared views, there we go. So here is where I have my login, and I need that to look more like what I copied from the wiki. So I need to do something like this. If they're logged in, I want to say change the link to log out. If they're logged out, I want to change the link to log in. Does that make sense? So that's why we only have one link, and it changes based on the state of my user. So instead of this, instead of this line, I'm going to have all of these lines instead. So I'm going to delete that one and put this up in my and now I've got LIs around my logout tag and LIs around my login tag, and let's see what changes here. All right, so this comes to a common problem with a gem that deals with code at a lower level. We need to stop and start our server in this case. So we need to stop the web server and start it again. And that will load the what they call the warden, which is in the Rails stack. It's lower than the Rails server itself. It's at a really low level. All right, so then the routes and everything should be correct. Any questions so far? Yes. Yeah, we'll get to how we're going to modify some of that stuff. Yes. All right, so I reloaded my page, and it says log in because I'm not logged in yet, right? So if I click log in, it takes me to a view that is generated by the Devise gem itself. And I need to sign up, so I'm going to click the sign up link. I don't have an existing account here. and it's going to ask me for my email. I'm going to say dave@lockersoft.com and a password, and I'm going to hit sign up. All right, so it signed me in. I have a user now in my user table, and my link changed to log out. So let's go and show you that user in the console. While that's loading up, let's log out and see what happens. The logout leaves me in the same page, and it says I signed out successfully, and it changed my link to log in again. So that the logic is correct, right? Everybody see that? So log in takes me to a login page. I don't have to sign up anymore. I just want to type in my username, which is my email address, and my password, and I can click Remember Me, and that's where it will keep the session alive for me. Now I'm logged in. All right. So let's look at. Make sure my console's loaded. I can query the user table, and I have one user now. And this is the user record number 1. First guy signed up. He's Dave at Lockersoft. This is his encrypted password. You can see that that's a lot of garbage. And it's got some other things like when the Remember was created, I clicked on the site, the Remember Me. How many times I've logged in. When I last currently logged in. My last sign-in attempt, which was a couple minutes ago, and the IP address where I came from. So all of this is very useful information that I can use to track users in my site. All right, so that's pretty cool. So any questions on that so far? All right, so let's go back and look at the Devise gem, and it talked down here about I can use these methods. Is the user signed in? Then do something. I can say if user signed in, then display some code or not. So I can use these different things. I can look at the current user and look at some of their information. So let's look at this one for now before I start authenticating some things. In my main layout, for instance, below my flash here, this is my yield. I'm going to put it right here. I'm going to put an H2 tag and say, look at the current user, and that's just an object that's filled in with some certain properties. And what are some of these properties down here? It's a user object, so I can look at their email address, right? So I can say current user.email. Yep. Okay. And I could say something like welcome current user.email. And let's see what it looks like here. Beautiful. I don't see anything. There we go. So I got a new page. Welcome, Dave at Lockersoft.com. And it should show up now all the places. Yeah. All right. So I can use all of the attributes in my user object in my code anywhere I want here. So let's take and look at my recipes and make my let's make my articles so that nobody can get into my articles unless they're logged in. All right. So if we look at the code, it says we can run a before filter, and we call the method authenticate_user exclamation point. So all I have to do is put that code in here, and that will be run before every single one of these 7 methods, right? So that effectively locks out anybody unless they're logged in. Oops. So let me log out. and try to go to my articles page. Here's a problem, all right? So I'm logged out, so the current user object is nil. There's nothing there, right? There's nobody to look at the email address on. So let's go fix that first. They have a way of using, I would have to do something like, if they're signed in, I could say user underscore signed in. I could use that information. That's one way to do it. So let's go to my application controller, welcome, and I would do something like if user.signed in, then I want to go ahead and print out the current user.email. Otherwise, this won't trigger and it won't execute this, and that should fix that problem. Oh, that's so much better. All right, so it doesn't like that. I have an unexpected parentheses or something here. Let's see. So, if I'm going to do on a single line, I have to do this, I think. I don't do this very often. All right. If, then, end on a single line. All right. So it says welcome nobody because I'm not signed in. Obviously, you could fix that, put that around the whole welcome command. But if I log in, so let's go look at my articles. If I try to go into my articles, it doesn't work. How about that? Let's get rid of some of these files. So my articles, isn't that where I put it? All right. So I have a problem. I'm logged out. Oh, this is a problem with my navigation. I just added that articles this morning, but I didn't change my navigation. So my it's going to page/articles, and I don't have an articles. It's not going to my actual articles controller. So I need to change my articles here to go to articles path. How about that for some troubleshooting? All right, so now when I go to articles, it says, oh, you don't have access to that. You have to sign in or sign up before continuing. So I can put in my username, password, and sign in. Now that I'm signed in, I can view all my articles. Isn't that great? So I can go back and forth, look at my articles. Once I'm signed in, it knows I'm signed in. I can see I have my Dave at Lockersoft. Everything's happy there. And so I can authenticate an entire controller that way. And I might want to do that with my products, for instance, and leave open my store controller, which is what we did yesterday. If I want to only show pieces, so if I want to look at my recipes here, maybe I don't want to show the some of these pieces, like the cost, obviously. And I don't want to show the links that say edit and delete, right? So I already have mine going to here, so I need to go to recipes. So I want to, maybe I want to not show these if they're not logged in or something like that. So I can just go into that particular view, which is here, and I can put a block around that. I could say if user signed in, display that.
Just use user signed in. You don't have to do if.
You have to do an if, yeah. All right, user signed in. If they're signed in, I'm going to display these links. If they're not, it won't display the links. So that's a simple, quick way. I'm currently signed in, so these should still show up. If I log out, and go back, they're gone. All right, so that's a quick way to limit certain pieces of my page based on whether they're logged in or not. All right, any questions on that so far? So the next thing that I wanted you to do was to add an administrative user to this site. And if I go back to my wiki on the Devise here, come on, here it is. It happens to have a nice little wiki on how to add an admin role. All right, so I can follow these steps. I suggest looking at option 2. It's a little easier. So we're going to add an attribute to our existing table. So our table right now doesn't have an attribute in here called admin. It's got email, etc. But I could add whether or not they're an admin as a Boolean to this particular table. And I do that through a migration. Now, their code here is old. This is at least more than 4 months old. It shows you how fast Rails changes. This changed now that we don't have these self.up and self.down methods anymore. This was when we're migrating up or migrating back. I'm doing a migration. So this is different. But let's generate a migration using this type of system here. Okay, I can do this Rails generate a migration. Okay, so we're going to generate just a migration because all we want to do is modify a table. We're going to add a column to a table. And some of the Rails magic is that if I name my migration something that is English parsable, this means add an admin property to my user's table. And then I tell it, just like I was creating a model, I tell it the name of my column and what type of data it is. And Rails will create a new migration that says add admin to users. And it modifies the specific user table. So let's do that. Rails generate, we want to generate a migration. And the migration, I'm going to call it add admin and name to users. And I'm going to have a name field, which is going to be a string. I'm going to do it in one step. And an admin, which is a Boolean, right? So all this does is generate a Ruby file, which is a migration, and it will add it to my migration file here, and I can look at it before I run it. And Rails uses the name of my method to figure out what table to modify. It uses that in the generation of this code, which is pretty cool. Some more Rails magic here. Questions?
Self-up and self-down, I did it that way and it worked just fine.
Yeah, it's backward compatible, but if you ever see those, that's an older version. That was like 3.1 version of Rails. When they went to 3.2, they added this method called change. So it's slightly different. So this is the code that was generated. And notice my class, it took my underscores and made them into camel case, because a class has to be start with a capital letter, right? And camel case is the norm. And it creates this method. It says add column to users. So it got that from this name here, the name that I named my migration. And it's going to add a name column of type string, and it's going to add a new column called admin, which is a Boolean. All right, so all I have to do is execute this again by doing the migration. And let's go, once the migration is done, let's look at our, okay, it's done. No, that's an old one.
The second migration tab.
Down, yeah, right there.
There we go, still running. It could be. All right, so I did my migration. It added 2 columns to my users table. let's go look at my console and do the same thing and see if I have a name column now. I don't, because this is in the old environment. If you're ever in the console and you make a major change to your system, you have to reload with the exclamation point, and it reloads the environment, and I can then say user.all again, and it should work. It doesn't. Okay, so now I have a name attribute and an admin attribute. For an existing user, though, those are blank, right? So, what is that? Some artifact here. It split the screen somehow.
There's a scroll bar on the right-hand side on the bottom. There we go.
I know, but it split the screen.
It's always split. The console always splits like that.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't remember that used to doing that.
Mine's always done that.
All right, so here's my user. The defaults for these, since this was already created, are going to be nil. There's no value there. So I can change this and make this guy an admin and also add his name at the same time. So I can say a equals user.first. I could say a.name equals Dave. I could say a.admin equals what? True. And then now that it's there, I need to save that record. And it actually sets those new values. So if I do a user.first again and look at those attributes at the end, they have true attributes now, valid attributes. All right, so for this assignment, you need to create an administrator user with my email address, dave.jones@scc.spokane.edu. And I suggest you do it in the console like I just did, or you can do it in the seeds file. You can create a new user with that information in your seeds file. That would work the same way. All right, so now let's go back to my main layout. And instead of displaying the email address, let's display my name. Now that I have a name attribute, I can use display name. Signed out, I need to sign in. And go to reload a page. And it says, welcome Dave. It now uses that new attribute, a new column in my database that I created from that migration. Now I can do things like not only do they have to be logged in, but they have to be an administrator to see some of this information. So in my recipes, I only want to show this information if they're logged in and an administrator. So where would I change that? All right, so if the user is signed in, I could say something like, and current user.admin, and Rails makes these methods for me automatically. If I put a question mark there, that checks the Boolean value to see if it's true or not. That returns a true or false based on the value that's stored in that column, which already is a Boolean. So I can try that down here. I could say, A is my user guy. I could say a.admin, question mark, and it returns true because that column has a true in that space, right? So now this is a little more harder. It's a little harder to get into. They not only have to be signed in, but they have to be an administrator. And I only have one guy, so it's not going to show any difference here. But so that's the kind of thing that you can do. You could just say, there's another way so that I don't have to check to see if they're logged in or not. And the Devise documentation shows a nice way in here called Where is it? Come on. Yeah.
Why would you have it check for name or signed in and admin? Because if they're signed out, the admin value is going to be nil, so it'd be false. Because your user.
It would be false, you're right.
Set to nothing once you
Well,
log out.
I have to do it that way, the way I have it here, way I had it. Because if I don't check to see if they're signed in first, this becomes nil. And I can't do nil.admin. And so that's the standard shortcut cut in programming. If this is false, it won't even execute this value here. So it's a way to short circuit the execution of this method so that it won't crash. That's the reason for that.
That makes sense.
And so that's what I'm getting with the admin. There's a way of doing it with a method called try, which is, I could say if current user dot, where to go, try.
Wait, what does acts like?
Acts like? I don't know. I can check the column in my database, my admin column, and I can say, is that going to be true or not? And this is like a try-catch on a single line method. So if current user is not valid, then the try won't actually fail. All right, so that's the same thing. Let's see if that actually works. Yep, so that works. I can't see it because I'd have to create another user, and I'm out of time. Any questions? My throat is valid. What? Can I keep going? I'm going to stop this.